can't offer you more, Counselor.
Well, that's fine with that.
But I can't offer you a piece of advice. You lay off the Hollow case, we'll get him dead to rights.
His wife is positive that he's innocent.
That's what wives are for.
I'd like to talk to the man, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. But you ought to listen to me first. This Hollow was crazy jealous over his wife. Even she admits that. He was so jealous he almost killed her with a knife on the sideshow platform.
Did she admit that, too?
She doesn't have to, Herb. That's what happened. Doc Johnson down at the carnival saw it happen. So did 100 other people in the audience.
It could have been an accident. His hand might have slipped.
Oh, sure. And I suppose it was an accident when his knife was found in Spectro's back a half-hour later.
That's no proof. His wife swore that there were no fingerprints on the knife.
Of course not. Even an amateur has sense enough to wipe off prints, Herb. We don't run this department on hearsay. We've got the motive. We've established that Hollow had the time and the opportunity to commit the crime, and we've got one thing more going for us.
What's that, Lieutenant?
Eyewitness testimony from the midget that saw Hollow enter and leave Spectro's tent at the time the murder must have been committed.
I've heard everything you've had to say, Lieutenant. And I'd still like to see Hollow.
Send that knife thrower in, will you? Herb Maris wants to see him.
Sorry to keep you gents waiting. I've been all over this place looking for that midget. When there's a crowd out there, every time I turn around, I'm tripping over him. But with the place closed down, you can't keep track of anybody around here. Sure hope we get this thing cleared up in a hurry. We're losing a lot of business.
Is that all it means to you, that you're losing business?
Sorry, May, but I've got to think like that. There are 50 people on this show, and they've got to eat.
Tell me, Doc, did you find the midget?
Yeah, he and Madame Dolores are on their way over.
Oh, excuse me, miss.
Just who do you think you're calling Miss? I am Madame Dolores.
I'm sorry, I didn't know, madam.
What's the matter? Haven't you ever seen a strong woman before?
No, I guess I never have.
You want to make something of it? I bet I could pin your shoulders to the floor in 30 seconds flat.
Yes, I'll bet you could.
Knock it off, Dolores. I'm sure the lieutenant meant no harm.
Madam, we only wanted to ask you a few questions, that's all.
I suppose you want to know about my poor innocent brother. Spectre was the greatest crystal gazer in the business. I remember the time he took a sucker for $1,000 cash in St. Louis. To think of all that talent gone.
Ah, but Madam, Spectro's great talent will not be forgotten. His glorious name will live on.
Live on? What do you mean?
I am speaking of Spectre the Second. Madam, I have found a buyer.
I hadn't thought of selling.
But this guy will pay cash for the whole concession. 10 all.
Oh, please, let's not talk about it now.
About your brother, madam. Did he have any enemies?
Spectre didn't have an enemy in the world, except for Harlow. But I never thought he'd kill him.
He didn't, and you know it.
Ask the police. Ask Admiral Atom about your knife-happy husband.
Somebody mention my name? You must be the lawyer everybody's so excited about. Well, I'm Admiral Atom, the biggest little attraction in show business.
Admiral, nice to see you.
Admiral, would you mind telling Mr. Maris what you told us last night?
Do we have to go through all that again?
Go ahead, Admiral. Just tell the truth and nobody will be hurt.
Well, there's not much to tell. I just happened to be going past Spectro's tent when I saw Harlow come along.
And did Harlow see you?
No, he was ahead of me. He ran into Spectro's tent with a knife in his hand.
And what did you do?
I just stood there and waited. A minute later, he came out again. But he didn't have the knife anymore.
That's a lie.
I'm sorry, May. But that's the story.
That's the way it is, Counselor. You can't win them all.
I was a little late in responding to May Harlow's call. Lieutenant Weston arrived at the carnival lot before I did, but not in time to prevent what happened to Admiral Atom. When I got there, he told me the news.
That's all we know now, Counselor. After we got here, we realized the midget was missing. We started looking around. The boys found him about 10 minutes ago.
Where was he?
Head down in a water barrel that they keep on the back lot in case of fire.
He was drowned?
He was hit over the head first and then shoved in. The lid on the barrel was loose, and that's how we noticed him.
Please, do you have to talk about it? It's horrible.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Hollow, but I'm afraid we do have to talk about it. As far as we know, you were the last person to see him alive.
At least we should be grateful about one thing. Your husband wasn't involved in this killing. In fact, I'd say it does a lot to clear him.
Really? How do you figure that, Counselor?
Suppose Spectro's killer overheard Admiral Adam agree to change his testimony. Then when Mrs. Harlow went to telephone, he went after the midget.
Suppose the midget wasn't going to change his testimony because he was telling the truth the first time, and Mrs. Harlow knew it.
No.
You know how deadly such testimony would be in an open court? You could have killed him and called us with your phony story and rig an alibi for yourself.
But I didn't. I didn't.
Lieutenant! Lieutenant!
What's the matter?
You've got to come quickly. Don't let them get away.
Who are you talking about, Madame Dolores?
Thieves, robbers, I don't know, but somebody's been going through my brother's tent.
All right, you two stay here, Herb. Let's see what this is all about. Looks like a cyclone struck this place.
Cyclones don't rip seams out of upholstery. Somebody was looking for something.
And they didn't find it.
Why do you say that?
Because everything's ripped up. If you were looking for something and you found it, you'd stop ripping things up. But whoever went through here didn't stop, so evidently they didn't find what they were after.
I wonder what they were after. It's a pity Spectro isn't here. He could help us. He always used to find his answers right here.
You know, there are times I could use one of those down at headquarters. Wait a minute. Let me have a look at this thing.
What do you see in the crystal ball, Lieutenant?
Nothing. Just had a crazy hunch, that's all.
Maybe it wasn't so crazy. Isn't that a piece of paper in there?
You're right. Let's see if we can get this thing apart. That was easy. Wanted for armed robbery, Walter Sharp. You recognize that picture, Counselor?
Doc. Dated 4 years ago. If Doc joined the carnival right away, Spectro could have been blackmailing him all these years.
You figure he killed Spectro to get rid of him, is that right?
And used Harlow's jealousy to frame him for the crime.
What about the midget?
Well, suppose Admiral Adam saw Doc leaving Spectro's tent. Then Doc threatened him unless he agreed to testify that it was Harlow that he'd seen.
When the doc found out the midget was going to change his testimony, he got rid of him. Well, the only thing I can pick Doc Johnson on up would be that armed robbery charge 4 years ago.
But surely you're going to question him about the murders.
Of course, but the trouble is, Counselor, we have no proof to go on. He knows it. He's a smart operator. Don't get your hopes up for a confession. He'll just deny everything. What are you looking for, Counselor? Souvenir?
No, a confession. That's what you need, isn't it, Lieutenant? I want you to delay that arrest for a few hours. I think I can see a way to force a showdown right here in the crystal ball.
All right, Sharp, you've had it.